Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to be reading from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. For those of you who are here maybe for the first time this morning, this is our 8th, can you believe it? It's our 8th message on the Beatitudes. Has it been impactful for you? It's been impactful for me. And so today, rather than just reading the last Beatitude, we're going to read all of them to conclude this series. Matthew chapter 5. Are you ready? When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." May God bless us today with the reading of these words. And God's people did say, I woke up this morning hungry. I woke up with a really big appetite. And as the day's gone on, I'm this morning, I'm even hungrier now than when I first woke up. And it's not that I didn't eat breakfast. In fact, I've had breakfast twice today. When I got up and had donuts with David. But I've been hungry all week. I'm hungry for meaning and purpose. I'm hungry for something different. I'm longing for something. I'm searching for something. And everywhere I look, I see hungry people too. I mean, look at the world we're living in right now in this time in our world. I don't know that it's worse than in other decades, but it feels that way to me right now because that's what I'm living in right now. Our world is awash in fear, in animosity, in division, in hatefulness. Sometimes even made worse by Christian people who make the climate even worse with their rhetoric and their hatefulness and their arrogance. And we look around the world and we see the way that people are anxious and afraid and lonely. There's an epidemic of loneliness in our culture in spite of all the ways that we have to connect with one another. People are just generally anxious and afraid. And we look at what's happening in the Middle East and we're worried about that. We look at what's happening in other parts of the world and we see the innocent victims of war. We see children, innocent children killed in the line of fire. And so when I look at the world, I find myself to be just incredibly hungry. In fact, I wrote the message for today. I write a manuscript every week, 2,800 words on Thursday. And then I couldn't sleep Thursday night, and I had a conversation with several people on Friday about what they were concerned about. And I couldn't sleep, and I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking about the message and what was truly on my heart. And I got up Saturday morning and tore it into 100 pieces and tossed it in the trash can because I realized my work wasn't done. Because I was waking up hungry. On Wednesday afternoon, I went to Trinity Woods Retirement Center and met with several of our seniors. There are more chronologically advanced seniors. They're the 85 and above crowd. And we meet with there once a month, and we punch and cookies and friendship and do a devotional. And so I started the conversation by saying, hey, there were about 7 or 8 of us there. I said, what are you worried about? And one of them, she raised her hand and she said, Pastor David, I'm just really worried about our world. This election coming up and the choices we have to make, I'm just really, really worried, and I am scared. I said, how many of you feel that way? What's your anxiety level about this on a scale of 1 to 10? And they all raised their hands and said, 12. And I said, are you talking about this with anyone? No, because it's not safe. And then I did a dangerous thing. I said, do you want to spend the next hour talking about politics? And they said, yes, can we please? It was exciting. I got home. I was so excited. I told Teresa, it was like walking through a minefield like this, trying not to get blown up or taken apart by, trying to listen and be respectful. It was a really meaningful conversation with mature Christian people about their worry and concern for the world. And at the end, I looked at them and I said, it's a good question, a legitimate question. I said, why are you so worried about this? You're going to heaven soon. I said, I'll give you 20 years. It was a little bit on the blunt side. After all, Richard Ziegler is going to live to be 120. He just turned 90. And I said, but look at you. You have all the money you need for the rest of your life. You've raised your kids. You're in this beautiful place. The world can burn down around you, and you'll be fine. And they said, every one of them, we're worried about our kids. We're worried about our grandkids. It's everywhere I look, I see people who are hungering for something different, something new, because there's a sense in what we're feeding on isn't meeting our needs. We can even look at our own selves. Most all of us in this room, we have first world problems, right? In fact, we have first world church problems. Do you remember the donut controversy of 2023 at Harvard Avenue Christian? Instead of cutting the donuts in half, we cut them into 4 pieces at the coffee hour, the donut hour, and people were outraged. We want the half donut. We don't want the quarter donut. And I can tell you, there are places in Africa and parts of the world, they just wish they had any kind of donut, not a quarter. We have first world problems, and we realize that our first world problems, we have enough to eat, we have nice homes, but yet we are left wondering, there's still an emptiness. Stuff that we have that doesn't feed our souls. Many years ago, I went to Plum Village. Plum Village is in the south of France, and it's a Buddhist monastery. And the Buddhist monastery was founded by Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a global 20th century Buddhist leader who taught activism and mindfulness. And he was a Vietnamese Buddhist priest who was expelled from Vietnam for his anti-war work in Vietnam. And once a year, they open up the Buddhist monastery to pilgrims who were seeking and searching, kind of Buddhist church camp, so to speak. And when I was there, I was in a group with people from all over the world. And it was interesting. Why were they there? Well, one man was a New Testament professor who was also an atheist and was depressed and lonely. There was another man there who was from New York City who had made a fortune but was looking for something. There was another couple there, a married couple there, who had lost a young son in a terrible accident, and they were racked with grief. Everyone there was searching for something. At that point in my life, I've been a pastor for more than 25 years, and I was searching for something too. And did you know that you can actually give your life to the work of the church and sometimes get to the point in your work with the church that you wonder if you forgot why you were doing the work for the church and lose your heart and soul working for the church and wanting something more? Can I be very transparent? My mother died in July, on July 1st. On July 17th, I conducted her funeral. And during that month, I then conducted 4 funerals for people in this congregation that I dearly love. And grief hit me in a way that I'd never experienced it before. Maybe it was now having lost both my parents. But I could not shake it. And the gift inside our grief and loss is that it strips us down to what's important. And the funny thing about walking through the valley of the shadow of death is when you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death and you're looking at your life and the world around you, it's incredible the kind of appetite you can develop and grow and the hunger you can gain for truth. And so as we've been walking through these Beatitudes, they're magnificent. They're Jesus' vision for what the world can be, should be, the Sermon on the Mount, his alternative vision for how we live and love in the world. And on that hillside, people gathered who were hungry and tired and lonely and afraid, just like we are, and listening to him cast this vision. And those blessings are declarations of God's grace, how God has come down to bless the poor, the mourning, the grieving, the meek, the unimportant, the nobodies, the lost, the afraid, and then calls us to join him in the work that he's doing in the world. And he casts this beautiful vision. And it came at the right time for me and the right time for our world, because as you read through them, you realize that what he offers us is different. How can you read them and not long for more? So Jesus says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst. God's blessing and favor on those who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness, he says. Now that word there, righteousness, it's a pretty hard word to define. I say it, and we probably have 200 different definitions of that word in the room this morning. On the one hand, some of us might, for good reason, say, well, righteousness refers to our personal moral conduct, our piety. Important things like integrity, honesty, truthfulness, fidelity to our marriages and to our relationships, how we show up as a human being. Now, others, and this is good too, might say that word could also be translated as justice, because wherever you read about righteousness in the Bible, it's always connected to justice. Righteousness, our behavior, how we show up in the world, is always connected to justice. And the Sermon on the Mount is about justice. It's about justice, people hungering for food and who are hungry and thirsty, who are poor, who are living on the bottom of life. But to only focus on those two parts completely misses the bigger picture of righteousness. Because what righteousness really describes is relationship. Righteousness is relationships. Righteousness is the idea that we are all created in a sacred image of God, that every human being is created in sacred image of God, and we're created to be in relationships with one another and to be in relationship with the God that created us. And so the idea here is that those who are hungering and thirsting for righteousness, what I think Jesus is getting at here is something even bigger. He's getting at this idea that what we're hungry for is not just personal moral conduct or the changing of our behavior or piety, or we're not just hungry, we're hungry for justice, but not for more than that. What we're hungry for is relationships that change the way that we see the world, the way we interact with others, down to the core of our being, that it changes us and restores us. It's hungering and thirsting for God. Notice it does not say, blessed are the righteous. It says, blessed are those who hunger for it. And so later on, Jesus goes up on another hill and he sees a crowd of people, a crowd of hungry people, and he has compassion on them because they're like sheep without a shepherd. And so he feeds them bread and fish. And after he feeds them the bread and fish, they begin asking questions. And Jesus looks at them and says, do not labor for the food that perishes, but labor for the bread that leads and that endures to eternal life. What's he talking about here? He's talking about this need we have for God, this sense of belonging and connection. And then he says, the true bread of God comes down from heaven. That's the true bread. And they said, well, give us this bread. And Jesus looks at them and says, I am the bread. Those of you who take my bread will never be hungry. And so, the end of Jesus' life, we see Jesus again. We see him living out everything he taught, everything he believed, a life for others. He is nailed to the cross, crucified for the way that he loved and lived in this world, crucified there on the cross. He forgives his enemies. And when we look in the face of the crucified Jesus on the hill, what we see is the picture of what God looks like, what love looks like, what relationship looks like. This God, in the person of Jesus, who lived with an unconditional, unfailing, unwavering love for this world. And so we are not made righteous because of what we do, but because of what he did. And it is a call. It is a call. This blessed are the hunger and thirst. This is a call to discipleship, a call to follow. The world does not need more Christians. The world needs more followers who will take up the cause and the work of Jesus, to be people of compassion and mercy, to be peacemakers, not just peacekeepers, who will be troublemakers in the world in the name of righteousness, who will not just talk about Jesus, but do what Jesus did. And that means being a disciple means to be like Jesus, to be with Jesus, to do what Jesus did. And if all you heard in these 8 messages was a list of do's and don'ts, then I've failed you. If all you've heard in this sermon, this series of 8 sermons, is a call to be a community of community activists, and those are both important things, then I have failed you. Because this is a deeper, higher, more life-giving call. I don't want your time. God does not want your time. God wants your whole being, your whole person, your whole heart, your whole life to join with him, to be in relationship with him. And out of that relationship, we're able to be people of mercy. Out of that relationship, we're able to be peacemakers, able to wade into the world. And he says, and when you do, you're going to find yourselves in trouble. He doesn't say, blessed are the persecuted who are persecuted for their self-righteousness. Come on now. Because there's a lot of Christians in the world who are being persecuted because of their self-righteousness. There are a lot of Christians in the world who are being persecuted not because of their kindness, but because of their hatefulness. That's not what he's talking about here. The world needs fewer arrogant, mean Christians. The world needs more compassionate, kind, loving disciples. And he said, blessed are you. When you live from that place in your relationship with God, and for the sake of righteousness, you begin to live in a world in a way that actually will cost you something. And so what does that do? It takes us all the way back to the beginning. Because there, it says, theirs is the kingdom. And what that means is, it means this. It takes us all the way back to the beginning, to our poverty of spirit. To giving our hearts and lives to God, our souls and hearts and lives to God, and saying, I'm here. I know you're here for me. I'm here for you. So if you're hungry this morning, come to the table, because we're serving up the bread of life. I just got to say it. Jesus is amazing, right? It's what our world needs. That's enough. I'm going to sit down.